Well, thank you so much. This is Andrew Williams Jr., and today's show is being sponsored by the Ed Fu Foundation. That's edfufoundation.org. And I'm also here in my capacity as international media advisor for the Nakori.TV, Universal Citizens Media Network, and the Revelation Network International. One of the hats I wear is as president of 5 Points Youth Foundation, and I'm ecstatic to have here both Richard Nelson and Lloyd Helverty today, in that they both reflect the activities that have been occurring around the world for us to address systemic challenges that we're facing that might provide solutions to all of us. On the screen, you'll find a snapshot of an infographic I ran across a few years ago. Just to let you know, Richard, what's happening is that, back in 2012, the Mayans had predicted the world would end. Now, obviously, the world hasn't ended, but we did enter what has been called an extinct level event horizon, where the changes in our world's atmosphere have now radically shifted so far that even though the Earth might survive, there is a question of whether humans on the Earth will survive, at least with the quality of life that we've experienced so far. However, on the screen, you'll see that they did create an infographic, and the red areas or darker areas are those places where the most people are most likely to die from the adverse effects of climate change. This graph was compiled back in 2012, 2013, but I would tend to say that it has remained the same over that period of time. And just to let you know, I mentioned to you that I am the president of 5 Points Youth Foundation. Also, I'm a member of the United Nations Global Compact. Just to give you a little perspective, I'm 63 years old. I was born in 1958. However, of course, I was conceived in 1957. That just so happened to be the time when in Africa, there was what's called the All African Peoples Conference. And this is where the leaders of several organizations on the African continent were agitating for independence of those countries from colonialism. One of those leaders was named Kwame Nkrumah. He went on to become the first president of the country we now know as Ghana. It was then called the Gold Coast. One of the visitors to that, however, was Martin Luther King. Also, Martin Luther King was there for the independence of Ghana. When he returned from his Africa trip, he actually was very much enthused and excited about the things happening on the African continent. But he linked that to our struggle here in the United States, because as you know, before 1965, we did not have what is now recognized as, I guess you call it, the second emancipation. Whereas in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation supposedly freed all the slaves in the southern states. But it was not until the fall of Appomattox in 1865 that the Civil War actually ended. And it was 2 months later, on June 19th of 1865, when Galveston, Texas, made the announcement to the people there that slavery had ended. And we are, in fact, this weekend celebrating Juneteenth here in the United States. And for the first time, a weekend that began with a federal holiday. So it recognizes that African American history is truly a part of world history. Well, or I should say, African American history is a part of American history. But for the purposes of this conversation, African American history is a part of world history, because in fact, the world began, or humanity began, as we're told, on the continent that the people call Al-Kebi land, but now has been known for all these hundreds of years as Africa. So technically, we're all people of African descent. And going forward, we all have one Earth and one planet. So in my personal opinion, Richard, it's critically necessary for us to connect all those dots. And as I was saying, however, we're now in a phase of what's called the Sustainable Development Goals. However, this is just the second iteration of the Millennium Development Goals that were launched in 2000. It was actually UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who through his lived experiences as the first Secretary General from the sub-Saharan Africa, that led the world into this 1,000-year plan to establish peace on earth during our lifetimes. And the most recent iteration of that has boiled down to leave no one behind. There are several historic significances to that. The United States and Israel had just scuttled the world's plan to wipe out debt for the African countries, called a debt jubilee. However, the Millennium Development Goals kind of happened on the rebound. So this is an effort on the part of the countries of the world to actually initiate changes in their policies and procedures to engage the rest of the world to end poverty. That's actually the ultimate objective of what we call the Sustainable Development Goals, to end poverty on Earth. That was one of the first Millennium Development Goals. There were 8 of those, the last being global partnerships. We now find ourselves in the Sustainable Development Goals, and goal number 1 is to end poverty, and the last one is global partnerships for development. So Richard and Lloyd, thank you so much, because again, Richard, you were there at the very beginning with 2015, when we launched a 5-year campaign at that time, 2015 to 2020, to create a worldwide community resiliency network. And we recruited about 100 Goodwill ambassadors around the world to focus on ways that we could actually bring change to the world. So Solar Roof Technology, because it's focused on permaculture solutions to what we're facing, it was very exciting to me, because in my own personal opinion, we are now in, as I said, what's called the Sustainable Development Goal phase or agenda. But the reality is that because we are in a distinct level event horizon, if we sustain the current activities that we've been doing, this will result in not only failure and fatality, but suicide of the entire human race, in my personal opinion. So I believe it really is not sustainability that we have to accomplish, but a regenerative lifestyle and regenerative development phase. So that's what underlies 5 Points Youth Foundation. That organization was founded in 1984 by Diane E. Watson, at that time as the Diane E. Watson Semi-Pro Sports Authority, just on the heels of the 1984 Olympics. That's relatively relevant as well, because as you know, we're facing the Japan Olympics coming up in just a few short months, even though there may be no attendees. But we here in Los Angeles are also looking forward to the 2028 Olympics. On the screen again, at the bottom, you'll find a map, and the map where you see the dark shaded spots are those where there are now local networks of the United Nations Global Compact. The lighter areas here are, as you can see, they actually overlap those places on Earth where there are the most number of people likely to die from climate change. So there is an overarching intent for us to take this opportunity to expand and empower the existing local networks, and then to expand those to places where there are no local networks. Now, that's been my intent for quite some time, Richard. However, there was some startling information that was just revealed during my visit to the United Nations Global Compact Leaders Summit, and I'll share that screen with you. My work around the world, primarily focusing on the Sustainable Development Goals, has been because here in the United States, I could find no real focus or interest or understanding about what the Sustainable Development Goals were. Of course, there were top administration efforts to first distance ourselves as a country from the United Nations. Even, as you know, we went so far as to disassociate ourselves from organizations like the World Health Organization, and previous administrations disengaged us from the Paris Climate Agreement. But here in Los Angeles, I happen to be in a city where our mayor, Eric Garcetti, is head of the C40 cities. And Los Angeles the city of Los Angeles, in effect, launched its own sustainability plan some time ago. That was followed just 2 years ago by the County of Los Angeles. So even though the national governments did not address these issues, there were certain selected cities that did. Mm-hmm. However, just yesterday, a few days ago, on this leaders conference, I was introduced to a study about the Sustainable Development Goal. And I'm so excited now because we have actually proven and accepted statistics to work from. It's unfortunate, however, that let's see if I can share my screen just a moment here. So you can see what I'm seeing here. Share screen. The reality is that we are, in effect, in the red. So on this map here, I'll see if I can enlarge it in just a moment, or I'll scroll down. I'll read it out loud so you can understand what's being dealt with here. The U.S. failure to deliver on a promise of racial equality. This is a visualization exploring the racial inequality and delivering the Sustainable Development Goals in the United States. This publication was released back on May 5th of this year. So the U.S. is failing to deliver on its promise of racial equality. While the U.S. founding documents assert that all men are created equal, this value is not demonstrated in outcomes across areas as diverse and varied as education, justice, health, gender, and pollution. On average, white communities receive resources and services at a rate approximately 3 times higher than the least served racial communities. Data on Asian, Black, Indigenous, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, Hispanic, multiracial, and other racial communities were used as available. But the evidence shows that unequal treatment impacts each of these communities. However, it is most often Black and Indigenous communities that are left the furthest behind. So Lloyd Helferty, that's very relevant to you and to me, because as I mentioned, 5 points in 2015, we recruited 100 Goodwill ambassadors around the world, but it was only in September 21st, International Day of Peace, in 2019, that I created a strategy for us to have regional ambassadors. So in Lloyd, in your case, you're dealing not just with Canada, but the Francophone countries and the countries of the Commonwealth of Nations, in addition to what we call Turtle Island. And Richard, as you know, Turtle Island refers to the entire Western Hemisphere, from North America, South America, Central America, the Caribbean, because all these were once the home of indigenous peoples. In fact, there were 100 million indigenous residents on this hemisphere before European colonization. That number now has decreased to 10 million or less. We here in Los Angeles, however, happen to be the city with the largest number of indigenous peoples in the United States. So we do feel a close harmony with what we're doing in Canada, Lloyd, and working with the indigenous populations there. But because the indigenous and Black communities are the ones left furthest behind, that gives us a reason and also, I think, an incentive for us to begin with those hit hardest, and then any improvement that we have will have compounded impact on what we do as a nation and society. I'm going to put the link to this particular website in the chat there, but you can see here, I scroll this over. This particular map here, again, where you see the darkest areas, that shows where there's the least progress. So there are only 5 states of the 50 or 48 contiguous, 5 states of all 50 states that are even addressing sustainable development goals in any shape or form. And so one example of this inequality is life expectancy. In the map above, it demonstrated a pattern in which Black and indigenous communities, represented by the orange and green dots closest to the bottom of the graph, are consistently in the communities with the least access to years of life, actual mortality. In the graph on the right, each box represents a racial population. And the graph shows how large the gap is in expectancy across racial communities and states. So my effort now, Richard and Lloyd, has kind of shifted. I've been, as I said, focused on the entire worldwide African diaspora, and particularly in Africa, because as you know, not only does it have one of the fastest growing populations, but in terms of the future, they're looking for the youth and demographic in Africa to represent over 25% of the world's population in 2050. At the same time, Africa still has the world's largest swath of arable land for growing food. And of course, it has the world's minerals and resources. But the intent is to take advantage of what's called the African Continental Free Trade Area. That went into effect earlier this year in January 1st, 2021. However, that was only one of 12 flagship projects adopted by the African Union in their 50-year plan from 2013 to 2063. I do want to bring to your attention, Richard, that Africa does play an important part in the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2012, the African Union decided to create what's called, as I mentioned to you, Agenda 2063, looking at 50 years down the road. But they decided to take it in 10-year increments. And because there was a shift from the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals, they developed a policy paper called the Common African Position on the Post-Millennium Agenda. So what we have now is these 17 goals are deeply impacted by the African Union and the entire African continent. So where we are now is that the organization I mentioned to you earlier, the United Nations Global Compact, that was founded in 2000 alongside the Millennium Development Goals by Kofi Annan. His intent was to involve not just governments in having the outcome that we're trying to accomplish, but particularly he was concerned about the adverse impact that businesses have, particularly multinational businesses, primarily from Europe and the United States, on the ground, so to speak, in Africa and other what they call underdeveloped communities. So the intent was to have a commitment by these corporations, a corporate social responsibility commitment, to address initially 3 key areas: human rights, including indigenous rights, labor, and the environment. Later, they added a 4th component, which is anti-corruption and transparency. So that's the basis and the pillars that the United Nations Global Compact was founded upon. The genius, as it's been said, of Kofi Annan is to involve the businesses, because in many cases, it's business decisions that affect the activities of governments. In some cases, there are companies that have a greater annual income than countries do. So the intent was to align not just businesses, but also the civil society, and that includes nonprofits, NGOs, interfaith communities, educational institutions, labor organizations, business associations, cities, and municipalities in having a say on the outcome of the business decisions. So over the course of the years, from then to now, those first 44 corporations have grown into over 13,000 corporations worldwide. However, there are only 3,000 of the civil society. Also, Richard, you know as well as I do that corporations a lot of times use these opportunities to greenwash or whitewash their activities. So even though now there are 13,000 applicants or members, over the course of the last 21 years, there have been as many companies that have been delisted or suspended, over 13,000, as they are current members, because they fail to meet the minimum compliance, which is to just report on what you're doing to adhere to those 10 principles and to affect the Sustainable Development Goals. So our strategy is to recruit another 10,000 members of the United Nations Global Compact, primarily through the civil society, but also through their largest membership, which is the small, and medium enterprises. As we might know, in many cases, it's the informal economy that are driving our communities, and particularly those of women. And that's very relevant to the United Nations Global Compact. As I mentioned to you, Kofi Annan announced this in 1999 at the Davos World Economic Forum. It actually went into effect on July 26th of 2000. However, there was only one executive director of the United Nations Global Compact for 15 years. So while there were changes at the top in the United Nations, there are changes in country and presidents around the world and governments, there is a consistent continuity of building on this idea of ways to engage the civil society with interfaith and business communities to have an impact. One of those initiatives I mentioned to you is Caring for Climate. And Richard, that's where the project comes in. The idea was for us to find ways that we could provide permaculture solutions that would impact the adverse effect of mono agriculture, if you would, and growing specific, and of course GMOs, those kind of things. But there were other important elements as well. And let me take this opportunity, if I can, to just walk you through, before I get further, the key initiatives that I've defined. I've taken the last 5 years now to actually do a deep dive into the United Nations Global Compact. What I found, in addition to the Caring for Climate campaign, is that there were other initiatives that have relevant impact. And this was just registered, Lloyd, just to let you know, yesterday on the website for the United Nations Global Compact. So this is what I'm publicly saying we are doing, right? And so I'm just beginning with myself and any of those that intend to want to join us. But as I said, the intent is to, I'm not sharing my screen. So let me just go back here. Let's see, share a screen. Yeah, so here we go. This is, I found this yesterday with the United Nations Global Compact. It's publicly available. I'll send you the link. But this is what I'm saying we're doing. We're addressing these issues. But again, I'm in a somewhat of a unique position here because I represent not just my citizenship in America, the United States, but also I was honored to be inducted as a royal, as a prince in the Akan Kingdom and the Ivory Coast, and the Igbo Kingdom in Nigeria. In Ghana, that represents all Nigerians in Ghana. So the intent, and I have to also say, Richard and Lloyd, that was brought about by another of our Goodwill ambassadors, Uba Awunwa, who lives in Canada now, but she herself is a native of Nigeria. So she opened the door and endorses. So we have royalty and tribal and indigenous people that are endorsing this effort on our behalf, right within our own circle and network. So again, this is the map that was showed, and this is the commitment I made for us to actually add another 10,000 members, but we don't want to just add them because, as I mentioned, there's whitewashing involved and greenwashing. So the idea is for us to register, educate, mobilize, and empower us as a group of grassroots individuals, because what happens then is that we have major impact on the local networks that we're involved with. Again, I mentioned to you earlier that the United States is kind of behind in this multilateral outreach around the world for the Sustainable Development Goals. There are less than 1,000 members of the United Nations Global Compact in the United States. There's less than 500 in Canada. So any major impact we have is going to have a major impact on those local communities. The idea, however, is for us to not just have impact on the local communities, but to expand that to those areas where there aren't local networks. So our team could be the ones that create leadership as we go forward if we're all aligned with the same purpose and mission. I have a very simple invitation to the world, and that's to just join the United Nations Global Compact. It's free for nonprofits, it's free for civil society, and it's free for those businesses that earn less than $5 million a year. So it's a very easy ask. But we also want to make sure that we include people that are typically left behind. I myself am disabled. I've been in denial about that for quite some years until a recent accident. But there is actually in Vision 2030 that addresses ways that people in the disabled community can work with their community to get things done. Also, another important component are the youth. So youthforglobalgoals.org provides you with a curriculum where students, businesses, schools, and local communities can find actual toolkits and resources where they can put to work to address each of these sustainable development goals. These are the 10 principles of the United Nations. And as I mentioned, they deal with human rights, including indigenous rights, environmental issues, labor, and anti-corruption. Specifically, in human rights, the intent is principle 1, businesses should support and respect the protection of internationally proclaimed human rights. And principle 2, make sure they're not complicit in human rights abuses. For labor, principle 3 is businesses should uphold the freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. 4, the elimination of all forms of forced and compulsory labor. 5, the effective abolishment of child labor. And 6, the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. For the environment, principle 7 says businesses should support a precautionary approach to environmental challenges. Number 8, undertake initiatives to promote greater environmental responsibility. And number 9, encourage the development and diffusion of environmentally friendly technology. Richard, that's where, again, you come in. So the idea is that I'm asking all of our network to take a look at these 10 principles, see where and if your activity fits within that, and begin using this conversation or using this information in your conversation and narratives about what you're doing. The 10th principle, as I mentioned, is that businesses should work against corruption, all its forms, including extortion and bribery. So there is, in fact, an online process when you go to United Nations UN Global Compact /participation. You have choice to register as a business or non-business. They have a template where you just download this template and you put this on your letterhead and you make this declaration. Essentially, you address it to the Secretary General of the United Nations, who has just been elected for another 5-year term, I might say. And it's very simple. I'm pleased to confirm that, let's say, Solar Roof supports the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact with respect to human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption, or for business and non-businesses. And I went to include academic institutions, business associations, cities and municipalities, civil society organizations, foundations, labor organizations, public service organizations, and corporate social responsibility organizations. With this commitment, we express our intent to support the Global Compact advancing these principles and make a clear statement of this commitment by working through, and this is where I made some adjustments. I inserted royal, tribal, indigenous, interfaith, neighborhood, and business collaboratives to build safe, sustainable, and climate smart communities and cities. This addresses SDGs 11, 13, and 17 in collaboration with us, the Ad Hoc International Advisory Board of Goodwill advocates and activists. So Richard, the idea would be that for those people that do want to take the step, if we all use this same template and format, then we'll numerically begin to be able to quantify what kind of impact we're having. So we'll be able to demonstrate to the United Nations Global Compact that we're working collectively together. So the idea is that we empower ourselves by increasing our numbers. A very simple concept, but I think very marketable and very, very impactful. So we recognize that a key requirement for participation in the Global Compact is the submission of a communication on engagement that describes our organization's efforts to support the implementation of the 10 principles. We support public accountability and transparency, and therefore commit to report on progress then 2 years of joining the United Nations Global Compact, and every 2 years thereafter. So Lloyd, this is where I'm looking to now engage, let's say it may be VCOM with Terrence Mayfield. The idea is that we want to help everyone that comes through us to be in compliance. And if that compliance means reporting on your income, your activity, that's kind of where we are right now. So I've committed to make this forum available every week for the next 18 months, or I should say 24, 30 months, right? So if people just come here and we talk, we decide what we're going to do, and then on a monthly basis, identify what we did and how our activities impacted one or more of the Sustainable Development Goals, that complies with the compliance requirement. So we're actually helping people to make sure that we are all able to be in compliance as we go forward. Here's another important project that the UN Global Compact promotes. It's called the Cities Program. There are cities, so you can imagine that, of course, starting at the top, if you have Cities Program, well, let me just read it to you. A framework for translating the Global Compact principles into day-to-day urban governance and management. The Global Compact Cities Program is the urban component of the UN Global Compact, the world's largest corporate social responsibility initiative. The UN Global Compact recognizes that cities, in particular, have the potential to make enormous strides in creating sustainable societies, where economic, ecological, political, and cultural issues are integrated and advanced. To that end, the Global Compact Cities Program is dedicated to the promotion and adoption of the Global Compact's 10 UN principles by cities, and provides a framework for translating the principles into day-to-day urban governance and management. In the spirit of the United Nations Global Compact, the Cities Program focuses on collaboration between all levels of government, business, and civil society to enhance sustainability, resilience, diversity, and adaptation within cities in the face of complex urban challenges. I've included a link here. Oh, there are 3 levels. One, just a signatory to acknowledge the fact that they are participating. There is a separate category called leading, the ones that are actively involved with demonstrating ways their achievements are impacting the Global Compact Cities Program, and innovating, which is the highest level of engagement, where their cities are recognized for addressing complex or seemingly intractable issues. Here in the United States, San Francisco was actually the first city in the United States to join the Cities Program. So hopefully Drawdown Markham might be a likely candidate where we could work with them and others to also join the Cities Program. Again, at the signatory level, there's no cost. Another one of the most important initiatives is called Business for Peace. Now, as they say, conflict and instability not only impact people in the environment, but also pose risks to all parts of the business sector. So Business for Peace is a platform of over 130 leading companies from 37 countries dedicated to catalyzing collaborative actions to advance peace. Richard, this is another case where let me first tell you that these 18 local networks have already joined this growing movement. That includes Canada, Colombia, Egypt, Germany, India, Indonesia, Iraq, Israel, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, the Republic of Korea, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Turkey, Uganda, Ukraine, and the United Kingdom. Much like the strategy for us to expand the local networks, my idea is that we can expand these countries that are involved with this Business for Peace campaign, even though Jamaica isn't named here specifically, nor any of the countries in the Caribbean. They are facing challenges, I believe, that empower us to take a step to take advantage of these resources that are currently available and adapt them to what our needs are. So we empower people on the ground to be the ones to take advantage of this opportunity. And this is critically relevant because it was just mentioned again in this past week they're expecting $12 trillion a year for the next 9 years to be able to accomplish the Sustainable Development Goals. That's trillion with a T. What's missing is an engagement with the grassroots or lower level. So our intent is to actually empower the bottom 99% to deal with the 1%, so we have 100% collaboration to create the world that we want. That's it in a nutshell. So this Caring for Climate campaign is one where any company can simply click the link and sign on to endorse the Caring for Climate campaign. That's what 5 Points Youth Foundation did 5 years ago, and what we'll be asking all of our participants to do so as well. Relevant also in Toronto, and Stephanie Lloyd are the principles for responsible management education. This deals primarily with those schools that are teaching our students how to become not just better managers, but better managers in the course of responsible management education. These principles involve one purpose, to develop the capabilities of students to be future generators of sustainable values for business and society at large, and to work for an inclusive and sustainable global economy. Two, the values we will incorporate into our academic activities, curricular and organizational practices, the values of global social responsibility as portrayed in international initiatives, such as the United Nations Global Compact. Method, we will create educational frameworks, materials, processes, and environments that enable effective learning experience for responsible leadership. 4, research, we'll engage in conceptual and empirical research that advances our understanding about the role, dynamics, and impact of corporations in the creation of sustainable social, environmental, and economic value. 5 is partnerships. We'll interact with managers of business corporations to extend our knowledge of their challenges in meeting social and environmental responsibilities, and to explore jointly effective approaches to meeting these challenges. Finally, number 6 is to facilitate and support dialogue and debate among educators, students, business, government, consumers, media, civil society organizations, and other interested groups and stakeholders on critical issues related to global social responsibility and sustainability. So you see, I hope that there are ways that we can use what this organization says they want to accomplish and work with those organizations already registered and making these commitments, and simply hold their feet to the fire and have them to engage with us and our team on ways to actually accomplish these objectives. Again, I mentioned to you that in Vision 2030 are 17 goals to transform the world for persons with disabilities. So when you click on the link, or you can just easily Google Vision 2030, the link will take you to a website, and each of these 17 goals, which, and for those that don't know what they are, goal number 1 of the SDGs is no poverty, or to end poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger. Goal 3, good health and well-being. Goal 4, quality education. Goal 5, gender equality. Goal 6, clean water and sanitation. Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. Goal 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Goal 10, reduced inequalities. Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. Goal 13, climate action. Goal 14, life below water. Goal 15, life on land. Goal 16, peace and justice with strong institutions. And finally, goal 17, partnerships to achieve the goals. So again, I've customized the link. It's probably 50 different characters that you have to remember to try to get to this online. So I just created a bit.ly link, and you can just bit.ly Vision 2030. That'll take you to the website, and each of these you can click. You'll find resources and toolkits to help you accomplish that objective. Earlier, I mentioned that the African Union's Agenda 2063 was very much linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is the African Sustainable Development Goal map, where on the right, you'll see the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and at the bottom, you'll see the 2063 goals. So there is, in fact, direct linkage between how what we're doing here in the United States has impacts on people from the African continent, because as I mentioned to you before, the African continent in its current situation is being driven by people around the world, specifically remittances from people of Africa that are in the rest of the world going back to the continent. They total over $60 billion, whereas aid from international organizations was slightly less than that. However, over $140 billion were taken out of the continent by illicit financing, primarily through Europe and the United States. So there is, in fact, a need for us to find a more transparent way for us to engage with what's going on in the world. Next step here is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. This was a companion policy that was launched along with the Sustainable Development Goals. And the idea was to link the targets of the goals along with addressing issues that are facing us, such as not just climate change and the hunger pandemic, but even things such as this current COVID-19 crisis. The terminology still works that applies to all those. So again, the bottom link will take you to specific outcomes. And I mentioned earlier, the Youth for Global Goals has to be, I think, at our priority list, because there was a student from Kenya that was at the Leaders Summit who said that there are many people in her community that are working on one or more of the Sustainable Development Goals, but they don't know what they are. If they just simply had an awareness of what these goals were, then they could become more engaged and active with resources that are set aside and made available to help them. So Youth for Global Goals is sponsored by a company in Canada, AHIABGA-TV, and the UN volunteers. And when you go to youthforglobalgoals.org, you'll find what's called the Young Person's Guide to Changing the World. And again, that resource addresses each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It provides a curriculum and guideline for what students can do, what teachers can do, and what the business community can do to engage their entire whole community approach with addressing the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, for this initial introduction, goal number 17 again is partnership for the goals. So actually, no matter which of the goals that any business or organization is involved with specifically, like yours, for example, Richard Hunger, all of them require partnerships. So that's the minimum ask we're asking. We're asking everyone to at least acknowledge working together in a partnership to accomplish these goals. So that's the booklet, Lloyd, that I'm making available to all of our AHIABGA ambassadors. And the front page will be your ambassador page, introducing yourself. So when you give it out to people, they'll see that you recognize and acknowledge it and support it. And Richard, you've always had, as I said, Partner has been part of our team. So I hope you'll agree to take a look at this and see if it's something that Partner could support. And the idea is that, again, I just simply provide one of these digital booklets for you with Partner on the front. And if you just be so kind to share it among your team members and ask them to participate, I think we can accomplish our objective in getting this membership drive on a relatively quickly. It won't take long. So I'm going to just briefly go through this presentation I uploaded to the United Nations Global Compact. And all it is it's a review of the last 6 years of what we have been doing to bring us to this point. And I did it in a reverse chronological manner. And the most recent addition is the Leaders Summit that we attended just recently and the key members. As I mentioned to you, one important value that the United Nations Global Compact brings is that there was a continuity from the beginning, from 2000 up to now. For the first 15 years, the organization was headed by George Kell out of Germany. And from 2015 to 2020, it was headed up by Lisa Kingo out of Denmark. However, now for the first time, we have a leader of the United Nations Global Compact from Africa, from Kenya, Sandra Ojiambo. So she was among the speakers that were there. And it was they who created, or she who was championing their 2021 through 2023 global strategy for the local networks. And I'll come back to that just a moment. I'm gonna just scroll through here. This is available online. So again, this just shows that we were inviting an entire world to participate with this. I myself was involved as a speaker, a global conversation with one group that's focused on energy needs in Nigeria and other countries in Africa. So, this just shows that we have been at the forefront around the world dealing with these issues. And these are the people, many of whom you'll recognize, that are part of our team and part of our effort. So my task is to go a further step and invite and involve all these people to work together. One of the ways I'll do that is through Andrew Networks. And so Andrew Networks is a brand of the PARXTC Export Trading Company. That's a California corporation. I'm the sole owner, but this gives us an ability to actually execute contracts, to attract funding, provide management expertise, and also to attract subject matter experts around the world like you guys that can actually get paid for consultation. I intend to present us as a solution to what people are looking for, and I want them to be able to pay us to provide our expertise to a wider audience than we've been able to reach ourselves. The idea is that 5 corporations own 95% of the world's media, so it's up to us to create our own narrative. And these weekly meetings right now on Zoom will become part of that. We hope to extract part of this and edit it and include it into attractive and appealable public service announcements, and also have our youth to come back, add music, add entertainment, add flash, and make this as professional as the Super Bowl ads and commercials to engage people around the world. These are just some of the organizations in Africa and around the world that have signed on to this collaborative. Here locally, it's the SOLA Collective and Cycle of Success, headed up by Terrence Mayfield, that's brought in our most recent collaborative called the Cairo Summit. I had the opportunity to have Andrew Networks virtual platform set up there. And the idea is that this is one place where all of us can begin to connect on a virtual basis and also expand our activities for your own organizations and what we have. Here I have to give, again, thanks and appreciation to Ola Easy Uba Awunwa. On the right there, she's actually, as I said, from Canada. I'm sorry, from Nigeria in Canada. And His Royal Majesty Chakuri Ahinatu. He's the royal patron of this collaborative. And so they open doors that few businesses could actually open. In Africa, you have, of course, the presidents of the countries, and you have the African Union. Unfortunately, they're disjointed and disconnected from the thousands of tribes who are still responding to their traditional leaders. So this team, this small group here, we have the ability to reach not just the business owners and also the governments, but the people on the ground. So that's where we look forward to finding ways we can collaborate throughout all of the echelons of society to leave no one behind. So I'll stop there, take a breath, and turn the camera back over to you guys. And I'm open to any comments, suggestions, and next steps. Ball's in your court. Thanks for joining us.
Well, fantastic summary. I'd certainly like to have the link to this video when you publish it, because then I can just also share that with the network, with our pod